So hi, Bill, and welcome. And I thought about this, and I could go so many ways, but I keep it simple. So we could be going on like for 30 minutes just telling everyone about Bill's accomplishments and everything he did all his life, and the time spent with Sid and all that.
Yeah.
So there is a homepage if anyone that's interested in Bill wants to visit. It's called drbillpettit.com.
Doctor is just DR.
drbillpettit.com.
Yeah.
And
there's a YouTube channel also. Yeah. William F. Pettit Jr.
yeah.
MD.
So there's a Swedish documentary about Joyce Carol Oates, which is wonderful. I recommend everybody in Sweden to look at. And the presenter of Joyce Carol Oates says, but she's done so much, so she's just a body in service of mind. And I like instantly thought of Bill. That's how I see him. He's like heartfelt presence, loving kindness, but it's not a word. It's not even an actor, a model, or a role. It's like who we all are and what he lets me see behind that comes shining through. And it's become very personal to me. So I'm really honored and grateful and beyond.
Yeah. Well,
so welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Those are very kind. You know, I remember Elsie Spittle one time when George gave her an incredible introduction, and Elsie said, you know, everything that George said is absolutely true, except when it isn't. But it is where I strive to be as much as I can. So thank you, Thomas. That's very kind. Yeah. My 85-year-old neighbor this morning, it doesn't have to go into details, but I took over some lemons from our lemon tree, and he said, "You're a great neighbor." And I got kind of serious, and I said, "You know what? It takes one to know one." Anyway, supposed to be a joke. So you know, I am glad to do anything, Thomas. I was thinking, I saw your questions, and I was thinking that I would maybe spend, and I'm fine on going an extra 15 minutes over the 90 minutes if you are, for the make up for the 15 minutes it took. But I don't have to either. I want to truly, as best as I'm able to be in service to all of you today. And so I want Thomas, I want you as a representative to, you know, to know that you're in charge here. I'm not in charge. I'm just glad to be in service. And what I thought of was maybe talking for about 15 or 20 minutes. I mean, besides my 37% Swedish, I have 37% Irish DNA. So I have a little thing that I have from my father's hometown of Irish immigrants. And it says, you can tell you're Irish if you have absolutely no idea how to make a long story short. So my wife is very sure that along with being Swedish, that I have considerable amount of Irish. But I think that I really could talk for about 20 minutes and then leave the whole rest of the time open to kind of, the 20 minutes would be kind of what's fresh for me. Because believe me, you know, in 40 years, I think sometimes people in this community or this exploring this understanding, they get the misunderstanding that this is like learning how to ride a bike or like learning how to swim. Both of those things, once you know how to do them, it's very hard to pretend that you don't, because you do. But this understanding is a spiritual understanding. A lot of people teach it as if it's a psychological understanding. It's not a psychological understanding. It's a spiritual understanding that informs the psychological and the physical. But if you try to get it just from a psychological understanding, when life hits you across the backside and you find yourself lying on the ground, if all you can say is, I'm thinking, I'm feeling my thinking, you're screwed. But if you start to incrementally have a spiritual understanding of the entire system, and so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna give you 20 minutes unless there's an outcry. Thomas, is that okay to do?
Perfect.
Okay. There's a wonderful scientific author in the United States. He's at Stanford. His name is Robert Sapolsky. He's written 2 books, which I love. One is called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's about the stress response and about how we activate it when it's not meant to be activated. And then, and he attempts to talk about solutions, but he's out of his area of expertise when he talks about solutions, because if you don't understand or aren't even willing to look into the direction of the spiritual, of the formless, all you can do is accept that it's an outside-in world and life is constantly stressful, and then it ends with death. And all you can do is try to cope as best as you can until you die. And that doesn't sound real exciting to me. His second book is a 700, that's about a 500-page book. His second one is a 700-page book exploring all the research of all the things that people think influence how a person behaves. And I won't go through the whole list. You can imagine some of them are genes, traumatic experiences, social support, a whole list of them. At the end, he says it's really complicated. Nothing seems to cause anything. But his last words are, after his 4-page epilogue, his last words are, it's important to remember that you don't have to choose between being compassionate and being scientific. You don't have to choose between being compassionate and being scientific. I've started writing some musings that I think my business manager is going to start letting out as blogs. Musings, I don't forget, musings of an old man on the mystery of life or something. But what came to me the other day as I woke from sleep is you don't have to choose between being spiritual, having spiritual understanding, and having scientific understanding. You don't have to choose between having spiritual understanding and scientific understanding. I have a good friend who's an internationally known writer who's written over 30 books in 30 languages. We were talking the other day on a Zoom link, and he said, you know, Bill, I was sharing with him from a book that I read of a man that I met back in the late 1990s, Dr. George Ritchie, who's written two books one is called Return from Tomorrow, and the other is called My Life After Dying. And Dr. Ritchie was dead for 9 minutes as a 20-year-old Army recruit that had a pneumonia and his temperature went to 107, and they'd pulled the sheet up over his head. He'd been dead for 9 minutes. If the brain doesn't get oxygen for 3 minutes, by and large, you can plan on the person being brain dead. They still they still might, their heart might beat, but they're going to be brain dead. But he was dead for 9 minutes. He had a spiritual experience during that time, which from his Christian experience, he had Jesus led him through the heavens. And I've wondered if he would have been Hindu, if it would have been, I can't say his name, I read the Bhagavad Gita, if it would have been Vishnu, and if he would have been Muslim, I wonder if it would have been Muhammad, if he would have been raised Jewish, maybe it would have been Moses. But for him, it was Jesus. And I was having this discussion with my friend of the experiences like that, which are many of people. And he said, Bill, he said, the way I look at it, there is significant evidence that there is consciousness that exists after our death, that continues to exist. There's significant evidence that consciousness does continue to exist after we leave this form. And there's absolutely no evidence that it doesn't exist. Some people think that because you can't prove things, that proves that they don't exist, and that's nonsense. Until the 1990s, nobody could prove there was electricity, but it's always been there. Our heart's always had an electrical system. If we understand any system, really understand the system, we do interpret things differently, and we see things that we just know are true because we understand the system. Mr. Banks, at the end of his experience in August of 1973, which is 50 years this August, it'll be the 50-year celebration. Some of you know that already. And he was my mentor for 26 years. He said, Bill, at the end of that 3-day experience, when the buzzing and the white light enveloped me, I suddenly had the experience that I saw what people call God is. I saw what life is. And I saw how the two are connected. Wow. That's kind of a peek into the whole system, isn't it? The whole system. What's behind life, what life is, and how the two are connected, that we are using as human beings. We've been gifted. Universal mind is literally the intelligence that exists in the entire universe. universal consciousness is the very clear consciousness that exists in the entire universe. And universal thought is the creative force that has taken the formless great nothingness into billions of stars and billions of galaxies. And frankly, for all we know, billions of universes besides our own. That's how much we know. And we have, as human beings, we've been gifted. We're a manifestation of that formless energy that is intelligent, conscious, and creative, which Sid was gifted with a metaphor, and it is a metaphor of mind, consciousness, and thought. And we're gifted with the personal use of these universal principles to literally create our own personal experience in this world of form. Every human being that travels the earth does this in his own or her own unique way. That's powerful statement. There have never been two human beings ever in the history of whatever it is, 80 to 120,000 years, that has experienced life identical to anyone else. Wow. Because it is an inside-out experience, one thought at a time. Sid saw that. He understood the system. And he did our best to point us to the understanding that he saw as best as he could. If anyone on this call, I see Karen and Marie and Richard, if the four of us were walking in a light dusk and suddenly Karen says, "Whoa, wow, there's a windmill." And Marie and I and Richard started looking around trying to find the windmill. And she said, "Wait, well, I'll point to it." And she pointed in a certain direction at a certain angle. As Sid was apt to say, if we kept staring at the end of Karen's finger, we would never see the windmill. But if we looked beyond her finger to where she was pointing, we would all, one by one, see the windmill. When Sid makes what sounds like unbelievable statement in the Great Illusion or in the Hawaii lectures, I'm not sure exactly where. I've been listening 5 minutes at a time to the Hawaii lectures recently because after 5 minutes I have to stop. I'm too filled up. Just have to let it, sometimes for a couple of days, just incubate. He said every human being on earth is you're just as wise. There's no one wiser than anyone on this call. It sounds like an outlandish statement, but if one understands the system of creation and life and their connection, if we are indeed divine energy that's manifesting into a form, that we are not God, but we are of God, of that energy. We are a manifestation of that, with all the intelligent, creative consciousness that comes with it, our personal use. Then every single one of it, there's no one on this call or outside of this call that is wiser than anyone else. So then why does it appear that way? It appears that way because of the different levels of understanding that people have, that that's true. Not intellectual understanding, but realizations where you over the last 40 years, and it seems like that for me, the last 18 months after 38 and a half years, that like the universe is expanding faster and faster, that my experience of having insights is expanding faster and faster. Now, even with 40 years and the last year, 18 months been faster, I think if you were to make a football field we have in the United States of 100 yards, or a little over 100 meters, less than 100 meters, I'm still on probably about the 8th meter line. And that's really exciting. It's not like I'm on the 17th of 20 steps. No. Mr. Banks makes very clear there's an infinite number of doors of understanding these principles. Now, if you want to, you can get depressed about that. Or you can get really excited. I choose excitement. I've got about 4 minutes left. Albert Einstein, and I could mention the name, but it doesn't matter. You know, his general theory of relativity was not able to be proved until after World War I ended, to where the world was no longer almost totally at war, and they were able to go to Brazil. There was Sir Arthur Eddington went to the solar eclipse in the 1919 solar eclipse after the war ended. And he had these powerful telescopes back then, that they were powerful for the time. And they confirmed Einstein's theoretical work on that had never been proven, even though, like Sid, he said, well, it is the way it is. And here's what Einstein, I love it. This famous physicist, he said, and he says his name, was one of the finest people I've ever known, but he really did not understand physics. Because during the eclipse of 1919, he stayed up all night to see if it would confirm the bending of light by the gravitational field. If he had really understood the general theory of relativity, he would have gone to bed early the way I did. He wouldn't have needed any proof. He wouldn't need to stay up for the proof. The more we look in the direction, and people say, how do you look in this direction of wisdom, of the wisdom that's already within us, in the divine consciousness that we are? And Sid says very simple. He said, in different ways, he points to just do the best you can to be present in the now. Another time in the missing link, he says, seek a grateful feeling. Now, he doesn't say make a list of all the things you're grateful for. I mean, if that's what allows you to have that feeling, that's okay. I mean, I wake up at 80 and almost 81 years old, and And I thought, I take it for granted that I can get out of bed by myself still. It may well become a day that I can't. There may well become a day that I have a massive stroke and I can't talk anymore. There's a time in my life where I would have feared that. I don't fear that. It's not on my bucket list to have a massive stroke so I can't talk. But I know that if that happens, and if that's what's going to allow me to go inside and prepare better to go through the veil of life, that's fine. That's fine. To the degree that we start to have spiritual understanding, we have an inner experience of knowing that we will be okay no matter what. No matter what. And to the degree that that starts to become real, you can try really hard to generate fear and worry, but you can't. Can't do it. Because there's nothing to fear. It says to find wisdom, you elevate your consciousness. And I always kid like, yeah, thanks, Sid. That's really helpful. I mean, I'd be tempted to bitch slap him if he said that, somebody said that, oh, Bill, all you have to do is elevate your consciousness. Whack, right? But then he very quickly, he says, how you do that? Seek a grateful feeling for what you already have in life. Gratitude and satisfaction have wonderful effects on our souls. They open our minds, clearing the way for wisdom and contentment to enter. The ego and the intellect are functions of our personal minds, whereas wisdom is a function of the spirit. One is mortal, the other is immortal. So I know there's a number of questions about energy, some of which I'll probably say I don't know, but I'll do my best to share just the thoughts that I have about what your question. So with that, 21 minutes, 1 minute over for an Irishman, it's not bad. It's not bad. So I'll take questions, Thomas, or comments or whatever.
Yeah, Hannah, do you want to assist me here, please, with some of the questions? I have one question just on top of my head. I heard something you wrote just recently that psychology, I heard it like this, of course. Psychology can't inform the formless. The formless always inform our psychology if we let it, which in my daily life, I haven't seen much about it, but I can't make sense of it. But
Intellectually.
No, but it makes sense to me.
Psychologically. Because that's what psychology is. It's our thought created reality, right?
Yeah. But it makes sense.
It resonates.
To tell people what to do.
Yeah.
Like, that makes so much more sense.
Hmm.
Talking about, was sitting with an old lady who just had a giant stroke, and she was sitting in silence and in gratefulness of all the things she's able to experience. How is that possible?
We tend to think, Thomas, of stories like that, like whether it's Viktor Frankl or Mandela, or there was a lady in Montana that opened her door, and a man who had been for 6 weeks raping and brutally beating elderly women closed and locked the door behind, and she said, "You're the man, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I want you to know that you're through doing whatever you're going to do to me, that God loves you unconditionally. He was disarmed. They were sitting at the table talking for 25 minutes when the police came. And she begged the police not to brutalize him because they were angry. They'd been looking for him. She said, please be gentle with him. He's really lost. He's really lost. But we tend to look at people like that as exceptions to the rule, rather than people that have some understanding of the system and are thus the rule in action, not exceptions to the rule. And it's not a should. It's not a beat ourselves up if we don't have. It's about being grateful. Sid used to always say, if you resist where you are, you're going to have trouble moving from where you are. And the metaphor that came to me one time when he and I were talking over the 26 years that he mentored me was, I don't know that he said it, but the metaphor that came to me so clearly was that when I'm in resistance to where I am, physically, mentally, weight-wise, whatever, it's like I've taken a 9-inch nail and driven it through my shoe, not through my foot, but just through my shoe. So that any effort I make to move sends me going around in a circle. Anybody besides me ever made a lot of laps with their shoe around a circle in analytical thinking?
I can relate, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what we're looking for, we already have. All we have to do is create a crack by getting into the present moment as best as we can, without judgment of how well we're doing. And what's inside of us will incrementally start filling us up with light, the light that we're made of. So, pardon, my Irishman came out on me. That's my short answer.
Beautiful. Joachim Rasmussen has something on his mind. Will you please unmute Ivan, or is it possible for him to unmute himself?
Can anybody hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. So I have a question. It's about the consciousness. And my question is, if we are this consciousness, sorry, rather, what is it that dies when we die? If we are this consciousness,
What would you what would be your observation, and what thoughts would you have about that? If we were doing the old Gestalt or Jacob Marino role reversal, where I'd say, well, now let's switch chairs, and I ask that of you as Dr. Pettit. What would you say?
well, I would say I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, you may know that I spent my first 2 years after medical school in a surgical residency in a 900-bed training hospital, or 700, whatever it was. It was pretty big. I think it's Rush University, which not for the people in Sweden probably wouldn't be interested in who Benjamin Rush is, but Benjamin Rush was the only physician signer of the American Declaration of Independence. So you can't say that you didn't learn anything from me today, because you now know who Benjamin Rush was. But anyway, so in that process of being on 36 out of every 48 hours plus, I won't talk about more than that, for 2 years, I saw an awful lot of people exit this veil of form. And what died appears to me, and there's a beautiful book called How We Die and the Wisdom of the Body by Sherwin Newland, who was a Yale surgeon for 40 some years, is that the body is left. You know, the body, at least initially, is still the same body. Now, without being vitalized by oxygen carrying blood, it will start to deteriorate pretty fast. But at that time when the spirit leaves, the body is still, in fact, well, that's kind of bizarre. Lavoisier, when they, who discovered oxygen, got caught up in the French Revolution and they were going to cut off his head. And being a scientist to the end, he said, there was a whole question of, does consciousness continue for a while? If there's blood, so he said, when my head gets cut off, I will blink my eyes as fast as I can. And he blinked them 19 times before he stopped. But then consciousness left even his head. And the body was left. So to me, that's the best I can do, just from my observations. And please don't believe anything I say because I say it. All I'm doing is sharing the best that I've seen up to this point in time. So the body is left, but this is our second home. This is not our first home. We came from formless. We go back to the formless. Now, there are some people through the ages, there are a lot of people that have felt that there is a reincarnation, that we keep coming back until we kind of learn enough to be in the presence of whatever people call God is. I don't believe that or disbelieve it. I'm open to it. I feel, I don't know if anybody else besides me, I have had some in these 80 years of experience, I've had some people that I've met that seemed like they were old souls, that this was not their first trip. Now, you could say, well, you're just making that up. Yeah, I am. I have a brother who seemed like an old soul. He's still alive. He's 3 years younger than I. I mean, he would see a hole and then walk around it the first time. I would fall into the hole 4 times and then finally have an insight. Maybe it would be better if I walked around the hole. He seemed to have an understanding that I didn't have about life, that seemed to protect him from a lot of the bruises and pain that I didn't avoid. Now, there are some in my family that would say that he, not necessarily an old soul, he just watched what I did and he didn't do it. So, who knows? Anyway. That's why somebody asked him at family reunions, they said, well, Bill said sometimes he got spanked 3 times a week, because that was the treatment for oppositional defiant disorder in the late 1940s in the United States, was wait till your father gets home. And they'd say to John, they'd say at family reunions, they'd say, Bill he says he thinks he recalls being spanked sometimes 3 times a week. And you were never spanked? And my brother John says, no, never. And he said, why? And he said, because I watched what Bill did and I didn't do it. It wasn't rocket science, so I don't know. Maybe he wasn't an old soul. Maybe he was just a good observer. I see there's a hand up. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about believing negative thoughts. I'm to be honest, I have a schizoaffective disorder, which I've had for 10 years. and my memory is not very good. And you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. My girlfriend left me 2 weeks ago. I've been together with her for 2 years, and it's like there's no end. You know, now I'm trying to remember what we had together, and I have a hard time remembering. So I'm thinking about it quite a lot because I want to remember what the time we had together. And it's like I'm creating my own suffering because I'm thinking about it all the time, you know. And I don't want, you know, I want to feel good. I want to be a happy person. And maybe there's just these times when life sucks, you know. But it's suffering, you know? And I would love to not believe my thoughts as much, you know, if I could kind of just listen to the good feeling, or you know. But it's trying, you know, difficult. And I just want, you know, I don't know what because you've been working with people who have schizoaffective disorder, I think, or schizophrenia. Yeah. Is there a way out of this?
Is that the question, John? Is there a
I
way out
don't
of
know. I don't
suffering?
know. I just want
No,
to, you know.
no, I'm with you here, and my heart goes out to you because I don't know, I didn't ever have, quote, schizoaffective disorder, but I certainly went in and out of clinical depression for 20
Yeah.
years. You've known that, huh?
I
And
know.
I think I had at least one hypomanic episode that probably was protecting me when I was very, very, very depressed and thinking of taking my life. I think the hypomanic episode protected me from doing that, and didn't, you know, never fully passed into where I, you know, got thrown into a hospital or anything. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a 3-minute old man, I could call it something else, but it's an old man pee break, because I
Okay.
listen much better with an empty bladder, and
Good.
I maybe even teach much better with an empty bladder, and I'm
Good.
certainly no worse. So I will be back in 3 minutes. Life.
John, tack för att du öppnar upp och visar dig så sårbar. Tack för det.
Jag var mutad, tror jag. Jag vet inte. Tack så mycket i alla fall. Så.
Jag tycker det ska bli väldigt spännande att höra hans svar.
Där har vi honom. Hello,
Huh?
hello, Bill.
Okay,
Yeah.
John. So
I
So-
just wanted to say I didn't want to, in all respect, I didn't want to moan. I just want to see clarity, if there is any clarity.
I hear that. Did you say you didn't want to just moan?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
Mm.
You just, what did you say? You just like to stop the suffering, or what did you say? Or
No, I just, see if there's some clarity. because I
clarity,
feel-
yeah, some clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like believing in thinking. If you can, it's like, oh God, I don't know. You go.
No. So if you think, see, that's when I talk about if you try to get there psychologically, because what's a belief is psychological and it's a thought created experience. And so if you're trying to change what you believe when you believe something, lots of luck.
Yeah.
Right? It takes a new, people somehow they have the thing that they need to learn how to stop believing that their thoughts are true.
Mm.
But that's, boy, if you try to do battle with your thinking, you're going to have to quit your day job, because it's a full-time. Have you found it is a full-time thing? John, almost.
I'm trying to get some distance to my thinking and get some, but there's trying, yeah.
Okay, well, maybe let me take a shot at helping you find that distance.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't know, I'm going to do the best I can.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine, he's a 3 principles practitioner. His name is Andrew McKee.
Mm.
And one of the first questions he asks people, he says, what would you be if you weren't your thoughts?
Mm. Rocket scientist.
Well, but he's saying, what would your identity be
Mm.
if you were not your thoughts? Because we identify with our thoughts as if they're telling us something about ourselves, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to do the best you can for about 3, maybe 4 minutes max. I've got the timer there.
Okay.
To just kind of listen as best you can. And I wouldn't even, John, worry about whether your intellect knows anything 4 minutes from now that it doesn't know.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I remember having walking pneumonia. I was about 7, 8 years old. And they took over to our wonderful family doctor, and he examined me and looked at the sputum and said, you've got walking pneumonia. And he said, you need to bare your shoulder or your hip. And they gave me 80,000 units of penicillin G. And I walked out of the doctor's office and I still had walking pneumonia. But 96 hours later, I didn't. Okay. So I'm going to ask you the best you can to listen for the next 4 minutes and then ignore everything I've said for at least 96 hours.
Okay.
And when thoughts about what I said come to your mind, to thank your brain for sharing its comments, but you're not interested. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. See, talk to me in 4 days from now. Okay, you're willing to do the best you can. I don't mean make that an effort or anything, but I'm just saying I'm going to ask you not to feel like you need to dance with your thinking about what I say for the next 4 days.
Yeah.
Okay, and let it see what it
Understand it.
does in quiet incubation within your consciousness.
Mm.
Because you really are, John, there's no, including me, everybody, you are no less wise than any of us, no less mentally healthy than any of us. It may appear that way, and you've gotten labels because I suspect you've been spending, without the details, I bet you've been spending about, I'm going to guess, at least 10 hours a day of your waking hours in some form of stressful thinking for a lot of time, for many years. Worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalysis, unresolved grief, you name it. Am I on target there?
Yeah.
Okay. I did too. I spent 6 to 9 hours a day and then wondered why I was going in and out of clinical depression for 20 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Overall, the quality of my thinking is improved, but I will tell you, I have times where I have homicidal thoughts.
Mm.
I have really bizarre, illegal thoughts. I have whatever sexual thoughts outside of my moral code. The difference between you and I is that I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Now, here's what I mean by that. I'll give you an example. Have you ever heard me talk about the time about a year after I met Sid, where maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years, I was driving in Tampa, Florida. I was in practice in Bradenton, Florida, which is on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And have you ever heard me talk about this, where I came up to the okay, so I'm coming up.
Wait. What? Just say I might have. But I might have heard it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you remember? Can you tell me?
Just continue to describe. I interrupted you too early. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to make the point about the content of our thinking. So I was in Tampa, Florida, which is a fairly big city, and that I hadn't been in very much. And as I came up to a stoplight, very busy intersection, the light changed to where I had to put on my brakes, and the light turned red for me. And people started streaming across. And the thought came from my brain, if you hit the accelerator now, you could kill at least 20 people.
Yeah. I
It
understand.
was a suggestion. Yeah. And I kind of, I knew enough I wasn't frightened by it, but I kind of said, no, thanks, as I put on the brakes. Let me know when you have any better ideas. Okay. But I was intrigued by that thought. That was puzzling to me. Why would I have that thought? So in years past, I would have started kicking in my analytical thinking, trying to figure it out. Have you ever done that in your life, once or twice?
Yeah. I just wanted to say this is what they in Hinduic, as wisdom call serpent thoughts. This is, this category of thinking, and I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Well, what if I told you that thought was a wonderful gift that was being given to me?
Okay.
Are you open to?
Yeah, I guess if you can.
Open to a whole new. Now I'm saying that what's behind life is benevolent and beneficent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not judging and punishing.
Yeah.
And so many people, I saw so many people die that were terrified of death because they had this idea and they'd been indoctrinated as a child, like I was, that this, quote, all loving had created a place where he's going to send billions of people to be tormented for an eternity, which sounded really, something didn't fit in my head, but I'm not going to mess with anybody's, you go with what seems true to you. But I see what's behind life is pure love and understanding. So the question would be, if that's the system, how could having a thought of pushing on the accelerator and killing 20 people be benevolent and beneficent, right? Is that a good question, John?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. I suspect the answer would not be in the intellect. So I knew enough at this point, even 2 years after, to go to quiet. So I just sat there at the light, being willing not to know. And the next thought that came to me was, Bill, you are exhausted.
Mm.
You're not taking care of yourself.
Mm.
You need to get more rest.
Mm.
You need to care for yourself. Wow. Wow.
Mm.
So that thought, really kind of bizarre thought, was a wake. It was a slap. It was a slap across the back of the head that allowed me to go to quiet and listen inside, and to see that I was exhausted and I needed to take better care of myself.
Mm.
Now, if I hadn't known that, John, I would have immediately started thinking about, oh my God, am I a killer? And then I would think about the time when I was 8 years old and I threw a croquet mallet at Jimmy Kreiner. And if I would have hit him in the head the right way with that croquet mallet, which I didn't, I missed, I could have killed him. At 8 years old, I could have already killed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought of the time that I got so angry in medical school at my girlfriend that I clenched my fist and I slammed it into a wall. I didn't slam it into her. I didn't hit her. And I broke a bone in my hand.
Mm.
Boy, there's something really wrong with you, Pettit. And they would have ended up finding me somewhere pulled off on the side of the road, mumbling incoherently,
Yeah.
I'm not a killer. I'm not a killer. I'm not a killer, as they took me off to the mental hospital in my psychotic break. There is no thought that comes to anyone's mind that ends up giving them depression, panic attacks, OCD, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or anything else.
Yeah.
It's 50,000 or 150,000 thoughts that people have about the thought that they had.
Mm.
To the degree that you know you're the formless creative energy of life that has been gifted with the ability to create thoughts, with the power of thought, principle of thought, the same principle of thought that's created billions of stars in the universe, then you're not frightened by any content. So all I can say is that it's not about doing better at not taking your thoughts too seriously, because if you don't understand the system, like I don't understand electricity, John. So if our country, the United States, was invaded and taken over by some other country, and they decided that starting tomorrow I was an electrician, whether I wanted to be or not, my life expectancy would be in hours, not in days, weeks, or months, because I don't understand the system. People that understand the system of electricity can do incredible. We couldn't be having this conversation from the United States to Sweden if people hadn't had incremental insights into the power of electricity. So all I can say, John, is that you're taking your thoughts way too serious. Now, seriousness has been mistakenly attached to responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard Sid's statement, and I'll finish with this. He said, seriousness and discomfort is to mental illness as damp and dark is to fungus.
Mm.
It makes it grow. Love and lightheartedness, however, is to mental illness as sunlight and dry is to fungus.
Mm.
It eradicates it.
Yeah.
And all the fact that you're on this call, John, says that you're looking in this direction.
Yeah.
And direction is the key, John. Please hear that. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. If you know that, do you know the topography of the United States at all?
More or less.
More or less. Well, I'm in the southwest part of the United States, near, not that part of Arizona borders Mexico. Okay.
Mm.
So if I wanted to get to Alaska, tell me which way I would do better, going 9 miles an hour north or 90 miles an hour south.
It would be better to go north.
Yeah. Direction is the key.
Mm.
Direction is the key. And the fact that you're on this call, you're looking in a direction of health.
Yeah.
And just be gentle on yourself and be grateful as you can anytime you even get a glimpse.
Yeah.
So that if you go from 10 hours a day of stressful thinking to 9 hours and 46 minutes, 14 minutes less.
Mm.
And then before you know it, if you have gratitude for that, it's going to be 9 hours and 4 minutes. And then it's going to be 8 hours and 16 minutes. Just, if you can stay with gratitude and not be judging, I should be doing it faster. Other people are doing it faster than me. All that, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. It has nothing to do with you or I. We're all on our own journey. Okay?
True. Very true.
Okay. That's
Thank
the
you.
best I got.
That was very good. Thank you. That's
You're
good.
welcome.
Nice to listen to you. Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Hello, Dr. Bill.
Hello. How are you, Ivan?
I'm good.
Do you say
First
it
of
Ivan
all,
or Ivan? How do you say it? Is it
Ivan, it was correct. Ivan, it's
Yeah,
correct.
Ivan. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We met a long
But-
time ago, didn't we? Didn't we meet a
Yes.
long time ago?
Yes, first time in London, 2019.
Wow. Okay.
And then I think we met at the Viva 2019.
Okay.
And then we met last year in Copenhagen.
Well, we may have to stop meeting like this. People are gonna
Yeah.
wonder,
I assure you, it's going to be more. I'm kind of the technician of this meeting, and we got a question on the chat in Swedish, and I think it's really touching the subject that you already had been answering from John.
Mm.
And if I translate it as best as I can, it's about universal thoughts contra personal thought. The difference between the two. And my feeling is you already answered it.
Well,
But it came up during John's question. So
sure.
and
Well, I'll may even make it more interesting even. How about the
yes, please.
difference between universal thought, original thought,
Yes,
and personal thought?
yes.
Let's make it as complicated as we can, right?
Is it possible?
Well, it is. I believe me. I was pretty good at it for 40 years until I met this Banks character.
Well, yeah. Before, yeah, me too.
Okay.
But now I can't. I don't think I can.
Well, I can't do it as well for very long. I'm pretty sensitive about it. Dr. Pransky and I, back 35 years ago, we used to do some weekend programs. And I said, George, we really need to put a warning sign up on the wall as people come in. If you come to this workshop for the weekend, it is quite likely, in fact, almost guaranteed, that your tolerance for stress will lessen.
Yes.
Your tolerance for stress will lessen. Wow. And I will get back to the question about universal, original, and personal thought, but this is what comes to mind right now. If I don't understand the system of universal energy, divine energy, whatever, and life can not separate from that, nothing can be separate from the whole, and that we're using that energy to create our experience from the inside out, one thought at a time. If I don't know that, if I feel like external things, persons, places, and things are creating my experience, then stress is inevitable. It's inevitable. I just read my wife's book, which is incredible. It's just incredible. But a journey through loss, a journey through, uncertainty. I mean, a journey through troubling experiences, which people like to give power to and call them traumatic. If I don't understand who the author of my experience is, then the best I can learn to do, which is what I learned, and I suspect many of you for the first 40 years of my life, was to learn to cope with stress and manage it as best as I could. Mine was primarily running. I ran 50 miles a week at times, 40, 50 miles a week, and I ran 4 marathons. But I ran because I had to. I had to every day run 5 or 6 miles to somehow lessen the stress that I was creating in response to life's challenges. Now was that 6 miles a day better than 6 lines of cocaine? Yeah. Was it better than 6 bags of heroin? Yeah. But there were other times when I was, and I'm not proud of it, unfaithful to a very loving and caring wife that I don't excuse, but I felt like I was every day struggling to keep my head above the water. Has anybody besides me ever felt that way in your life? Yeah. Because it looked like stress was coming from things external to me over which I had absolutely no control over, most of them. Other people's behavior, other people's, things that happen, losses, whatever. So in that world, the best you can do is to really have a high stress tolerance. I took pride in the fact that I could carry metaphorically 250 to 300 pounds of stress on my back and still function every day at work. As I sat that day in 1983 on April Fool's Day, listening to this welder with a 9th grade education talk quietly, and I had 26 and a half years of formal education. Within 30 minutes, I felt 250 to 300 pounds of weight go off of my shoulders and chest. I couldn't have told you how or why. Later, I saw that I'd gotten a glimpse that that I was the author of that weight. Many of you may know that on tomorrow, actually, I'm doing it'll be 8 o'clock your time. It's 12 noon. I'm doing a webinar called Healing from the Past. And it must have touched a link because I think we have close to 300 people signed up. Because I said to my business manager, as we were just discussing, and she heard it, and I said, you know, it seems to me like that people, even many people that have still been around the principles, because it's incremental, it's okay. We're all on our journey, that they're carrying behind them and pulling through life a sled that has varying amounts of weight on it from the past, from past experiences. Guilt, resentment, hurt, grief, whatever. And it's one thing to be carrying a slide through life that has 5 pounds on it. And it's another thing to be dragging, or I guess, should I be speaking in kilos, I guess, 2.5 kilos versus 150 kilos on that sled. One of those two people is going to experience life as a lot more difficult than the other. And what looking in the direction of universal principles and the whole system of life is, the weights start dropping off the sled without you doing anything. You don't have to work at trying to deal with issues and the issue with what happened when I was 4 and the issue with what happened when I was 9. No. As your spiritual understanding naturally comes out from the inside, you're going to look over or look back and notice that the sled has much less weight on it. So let me go to universal, original, and personal thought, because this is important. When I think of universal thought, or like in the Enlightened Gardener Revisited, it's on page 38. That's how much I remember. One of the characters, one of the psychologists says that she realized, or if thoughts appeared that were seen as just thoughts and not as realities, the clients would not be categorized as having mental illnesses, various mental illnesses. If they took these thoughts in stride, that rather than reacted to them so strongly, we wouldn't say that they were mentally ill. There need be only one generic mental illness, an inability to see the role of thought with a capital T. So capital T, thought, is the power, the creative power that's in the universe that my lemon tree is manifesting right now by making lemons. My neighbor here has orange tree making oranges. I was watching the birds. I love watching the birds in my backyard. You see the creative manifestations of divine thought or universal thought. If you don't like the word divine, you know, you can put Fred, you can call it whatever you want to. I don't care. It's a label. To me, I know it matters to some people, but they are making up the mattering in their head, right? Which we all do. We get to use that same creative power and principle of thought, the creative energy, the creative aspect of what's behind life, to create our experience moment to moment via thought. Sid says we all, and now here's the deal, folks. Much of our thinking as we go through life is not conscious. It's not conscious. if you try to take responsibility for not only your conscious thoughts, but your unconscious thoughts, the first one, even the first one will drive you batshit. But if you add the second one, you're going to be batshit squared. That's not a technical term. I'm sorry if I offend anybody, because I've done that. What do I mean by unconscious? Our brain is a fancy computer. That's what it is. It stores our life information in different files. I'm fascinated by what things get pulled up out of different files, because in order to use the space so our brains wouldn't have to be 40 pounds, different things that are related are put into related files. There's no way that you can keep, even from 20 years of life, keep all your experiences conscious that you have stored in there. But let's say here, one of you, Camilla, Hannah, one of you, Anna and Cecilia, one of you went to ask a question, and when you came up, and I had it on speaker, and you came up on the whole picture there, as I listened to your question, what if suddenly I had a tear in my eye and my stomach kind of got unsettled, and I noticed the hair on my arms was bristling as let's say, as Hannah was answering the question, asking the question, or Camila. And I was puzzled, but I just stayed with, let's say, Camila. Stayed with Camila. And as she asked her question, I said, oh my God, it came out of the consciousness, into consciousness, that she looked very similar to a friend of mine from college that was killed in a motor vehicle accident or died suddenly. That memory was being triggered by the similarities because it was pulled out of the file. And all I could feel was the feeling. So there's a lot of times in life, we have a virus detector. We're going to get viruses, psychological viruses. We're going to have thoughts that we've attached our happiness to, that we're going to suddenly realize we've lost our loving, lighthearted feeling. But if we know when that happens, to just be as present as we can, go to silence as best as we can, as soon as we can, we'll be fine. Because mental well-being is like a cork that can be pulled under the water, but as soon as you let go of it, it does not need a GPS to get back to the surface. Now, to me, that's just a fact. That's just the way the system is. People say, oh, you just believe that. Well, I don't know. I guess if you see something happen 2,000 times in a row, you can call that a belief or you can call it a realization. So universal thought is just the power that we're using to create personal thoughts. Now, so what is original thought? Well, Sid talks about that as wisdom, as a spiritual intelligence that's a manifestation of universal mind that's before this world. It's not of this world. These principles are not of this world. They're formless. They're before this world. But we have access. We're made of this formless energy so that when our personal mind gets quiet enough from just us simply just being present as best as we can, we will have insights out of the blue. We'll see things. As I read these wonderful, brilliant scientists, there are many times in each of their books that they use the word somehow because they can't explain it. And that's original thought. Somehow the body knows to do this. Somehow people seem to have moments where they somehow know exactly what to do, even though it's the hard thing to do. And I'm gonna tell one short story to make the point, and then I'll stop again. I apologize for my Irishness. Don't mean to contaminate my Swedishness with all my Irishness. Probably 30 some years ago now, there was a plane crash on the Potomac River outside of Washington, D.C. The plane took off and it had not been de-iced sufficiently. It was in the winter and it crashed into the Potomac River. I think his name was Lenny Skudnick. He was, I think, a plumber. I may have this wrong, the details, but he was driving by along the Potomac River as he saw this plane crash into the river. Now, he himself and other people described him as somewhat introverted, kind of shy, quiet man who spent a lot of time by himself. Socializing wasn't his favorite thing. Being out doing, and I mean, he was a good person. He was a nice person. He did his work. I think he was a plumber, whatever he did. It was a solitary work. He saw this happen. He drove his truck down near his plumbing truck down near the water. He dove into this ice cold water and went out and one by one started pulling people back in. He swam and other people saw this and he inspired other people to do the same. And many people's lives were saved that night. And I don't know how many died, but he was shivering one. And I remember the interview. They said, you must have taken tremendous courage to swim out there and do what you did. And I forget his exact words, but he said, how did you do that? He said, I have no idea. He said, I just saw what needed to be done and I did it. And he said, you're really shaking. He said, you're really cold, right? And he said, well, I am really cold, but part of this is because I don't know how to swim. I don't know about you. I get choked up whenever I tell that story. He didn't know how to swim. But he didn't let that stop him from swimming out and saving people's lives. That place where we wake up in the morning, and as I get less attached to my analytical thinking, I have the experience more and more of waking up in the morning, especially. Your brain slows down. Most people's brain, even the most active brain, slows down at least about 50% while you're asleep. So when I wake up now, oftentimes things come to me. They're coming from the inside. I'm not, if I start taking credit for them, believe me, I'll dry the well up really fast because I'm just receiving them from that well of wisdom that everybody on this call is drawing from, if we can get out of the way of our analytical mind. And again, you can't do anything with your analytical mind to get your analytical mind out of the way. It's impossible. The only thing you can do is do the best you can. People ask me, what do you do when you have a thought thunderstorm? I got quiet one time in response to that, and I thought, what do? I do the best that I can to be where I am. without judgment of how well I'm doing. If I'm only, John, if I'm only doing a 2 out of 10, I just decide to be the best 2 I can be. And before I know it, I'm a 3.
How did
And
you
then-
know I was listening to you then?
And then if I'm the best 3, before I know it, I'm a 4. But if I get in resistance to only being a 2 out of 10, believe me, before I know it, I'm in the basement. I'm down to 1 and I'm in the basement. And then I realize that I'm the one pushing on the down button on the elevator. How did I get down in the damn basement again? The only person that can take me there is me. And if I realize that, I don't even judge myself harshly. I go, okay, let me try again to do the best I can to be where I am. It's not rocket science, folks. Sid meant it when he said when the answer is complicated, it's the intellect. When the answer is simple, it's the spirit. Let me stop.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Bill. When I'm talking about this, I'm using the metaphor of computer. It started with your computer failure this evening.
Sure.
But I believe we are equipped with an internal operating system, exactly like a computer is. And we all have the same operating system. And that operating system is taking care of us every moment, if we let it, and when we let it. So thank you.
The more understanding that we have, even then we do that without effort. That's the key, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, is there anyone else who wants to? We are up to 41, 11 minutes past. So
Maybe people have enjoyed as much as they can stand, even.
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe.
I
I
have
wanna take
enjoyed
the
it enormously.
yeah.
Yes, Thomas.
So I want to take the opportunity to thank you, Bill,
You're welcome.
in respect
you
of
so much.
everybody's time. And maybe this is a good place to stop.
Okay. Okay. I see a couple of hands. Do we want to? I don't know. Either way, I'm willing to do either. I'll try to be concise and limited to 2-minute answers if you're up
Okay.
for taking them.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Okay.
Aunt Cecilia was.
Okay, go ahead, Aunt Cecilia.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so appreciate for you joined us today, and I want to ask you something because I'm in psychotherapist, and I really try to make that people really understand that they be what they think. But so I just wonder, how do you work with persons who they are believing that they are sick, and I try to say you're not sick. This was a big question, but I hope you can. Okay.
Well, again, there's to try to answer that in 1 minute or 2 minutes, I think is really silly, as I suppose. But I will say this: you will know as your own grounding and your own level of understanding increases. You won't ever try to get people to understand anything. You'll just help them to look in a direction that they understand. And I can't underestimate how powerful Mr. Banks's videos and books are. I would encourage everybody on this call to take your time, but to read all 6 of Mr. Banks's books, small books, at least twice through. You'll have different eyes and ears the second time through. And I know that some of the English language, I don't know if they're getting translated into Swedish, but also on www, I'm sure Thomas has given you that, www.sidbanks.com, sidbanks.com. There's the Hawaii lectures, there's the Long Beach lectures, there's the Washington lectures. I would encourage you to sometime watch them 4 minutes at a time, 5 minutes at a time, and just let them sink, let them, like I asked John to do, to incubate. So you will know, you don't need me to tell you, as your understanding deepens, you will be surprised what comes out of your mouth, because you'll be just a conveyor of the truth. And as you're on your own journey, be grateful for what you have to share, and what you'll have to share will increase as your own understanding increases. Does that resonate? Helpful? Okay. We had one more question. How do you say your name, Ricard? He has to unmute himself. Or
my name, you can say it, Ricard.
Say again?
Ricard.
Okay, Ricard. Okay.
Richard. You can say Richard too.
Okay, no, Ricard. Okay, Ricard.
Thank you very much for this webinar. I have a short question.
Sure.
What do you think about meditation to slow down your brain and meet the more bigger understanding?
Okay. Meditation is an attempt, depending on what kind of meditation it is. I was surprised as I read about some meditations that they're about focusing and learning how to use your personal mind in a focused way, and people take pride in that they focused on something for 12 hours, some great meditator. So, but if the meditation has as its goal to find a quieter state of personal thinking, then it's a good goal, Ricard. However, as Mr. Banks says, there's a difference between the meditating and the state of meditation. And as people have more insights from within, they live more of the time in a meditative state, regardless of whether they're in, like Sid says, you could be in downtown New York City in the midst of incredible numbers of people and traffic and be in a meditative state, a state of a quiet personal mind. So, and in fact, he makes in the Enlightened Gardener Revisited, he makes this dramatic statement, which probably the 5th time I read the book, I was quiet enough to hear it. He says, your level of consciousness and your level of meditation are the same thing. There are 2 ways of describing the same thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly better than a lot of other ways that people attempt to distract themselves or to get present. And it's a beautiful thing. I will say that one of the wonderful teachers in the 3 principles admits that whereas my alarm system was depression, was mood going down, his alarm system was anxiety, that he was misusing these beautiful gifts. And he when he speaks, he even shares that he was up to meditating, having to meditate up to 4 hours a day in order to deal with the anxiety that he was creating. Now, as he's learned the principles, he doesn't have to do that. Now, I will tell you, every morning I sit quietly for 3 minutes with my eyes closed, and in another 2 minutes quietly watching the birds. And if you want to call that 5 minutes of meditation, I have no problem with that. To just make sure that I start the day as much as possible in the present moment. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay, folks, I loved my time in Sweden. I hope, who knows? I hope maybe before I pass through the veil, I'll get to come back again sometime.
Yeah.
And thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Will.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having me today. Can we unmute people so we can say goodbye? And
Yes.
Thank
Adela.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bye.
Good evening.
Thanks, Bill.
thank you, Thomas. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye,
Good.
Marie. Marie,
Lots
my
of love.
wonderful
really appreciate
guide
it.
through Sweden. Thank you.
I-
Okay.
I'm